Hello and welcome back to another tutorial. In this video I'll be sharing how to make this beautiful shirt dress with straps and puffy sleeve. If this is something you're interested in learning, you definitely want to keep on watching up to the end of this video. This is the fabric that I'll be using. It's called brush face or senator material. This is 2 meters, so I have 2 meters of this material, and this is what I'll be using. It's somewhat like cashmere but a little bit thicker. I also have all these other items here. Okay, now to begin, I'm going to start off by cutting out my sleeve because like I said, I have 2 meters and I'm trying to ensure that I have enough fabric for everything and I don't have to buy extra fabric. So this is my fabric folded into 4 and I'm going to cut out my sleeve. All right, so my actual sleeve length is 24 inches, but this is 27 inches long, and the width of this is 2 times my arm circumference. So this is 13 inches on fold, so a total of 26 inches wide. So this sleeve is 27 inches long and 26 inches wide. So this is what we have for the sleeve. So I started off with the sleeve just so I have enough fabric to go around. Okay, so I don't want to end up having like not enough fabric for the other part or certain parts, so that is why I cut out the sleeve first. All right, so what we'll be doing next is to make the back plan, and to do the back plan you want to ensure that your fabric is folded on a bias. Now my fabric is folded on a bias. As you can see, it is wider at the base and tends to narrow down towards the top. Next, I'll be getting my shoulder point, and to do this, from this widest part here, I'm going to measure the length upwards, which is 38 inches, and wherever I have my 38 inches point would be my shoulder line. So I'm just going to measure from that widest part upwards and get the 38-inch mark, which is this line. So this would serve as my shoulder line. Now from that line, I'm going to take my body point, which is my shoulder to bust, shoulder to waist, shoulder to hip, as well as the length. I also went ahead to create a neckline which is 3 inches wide and 1.5 inch deep. So now this is the bust line, my waistline, the hip line, and the widest part here would serve as the length of the garment. Okay, what we'll be doing next is to create the dart for the back of this dress. Now from the waistline, which is this one here, I'm going to mark 4.5 inch from the middle. From this fold, I'm going to go inwards and mark 4.5 inch. Haven't marked the 4.5 inch mark, I'm going to go upwards by 5 inch and go downwards by 5 inch. Then connect it to make the dart for this back piece. When you do that, it should look something like this. Next up, we'll be contouring the dart for this back plan, and to do this, I'm going to mark ½ inch on either side of that line along the waistline, then connect it to that 5-inch point on either side of the dart. So this is what it looks like when you have contoured your dart, and basically this would be the dart for the back plan. Now I'll be taking a quarter of my bust and a quarter of my waist measurement, and I'll be adding 2 inches to them respectively. So I'm going to take those measurements out now. Now when taking these measurements, I did not take my hip circumference. Okay, I did not impute my hip circumference. So basically what I did was, from the waist measurement, which is here, I created a slant line to meet the hem of the garment here. Then I'm going to cut out the length, ensuring that I go up that edge by 1 inch, just so it curves a little bit nicer all along the side and meets up with the middle of the garment. When you cut it out, this is what it looks like. This is what the back plan looks like. So next up, we'll go ahead and cut out the front plan. Having cut out the back plan, the next thing we'll be making is the front plan, and to do this you want to ensure your fabric is folded on a bias like what you did for the back, and the only difference will be the neckline and the center front. The center front is 2 inches wider because we'll be attaching buttons to this. Okay, so I basically placed my back plan over that folded fabric, and then I cut out the hem, the sides, the armhole, as well as the shoulder. Then this center fold here, which we'll be using as the allowance for the buttons, I'm going to slit it open just so we have 2 individual front pieces. Okay, but before you slit it open, you want to ensure you indicate where the button allowance stops, and to do this I basically used a chalk to trace it out on the fabric. Having cut it out, this is what we have. You can see that I have 2 individual pieces for the front. That's my waistline, my bust line, the hip line. So you want to indicate all these lines when you cut your fabric. Okay, Now from this waistline, I'm going to go inwards by 4.5 inches to take the dart. Now do note, I'm not taking the dart from the edge of the fabric, but for where the zipper, from where the button allowance stops. Okay, so from where that button allowance stops, I'm going to go inwards along the waistline by 4.5 inches. Then I went upwards and downwards that point by 5 inches, similar to what I did for the back. Then I'm going to contour that line by taking half an inch on either side of that line along the waistline, then connect it to that 5-inch point below the waistline and to that 5-inch point that goes above the waistline. Having drawn out the dart, what I'll be doing next is to cut it out. Now do know that this is something I'm doing only for the front plan. The dart for the back, I am not cutting it out. I'm just going to cut out the dart plan of the front. Okay, so when you do that, this is what it should look like. Then I'm going to reduce the length of the front by 1 inch along the hem. So from that hemline or along that hemline, I'm going to reduce it by 1 inch. And this is something I'm doing just for the front. I'm not taking any length from the back, but just the front. Then from the front neckline, I'm going to deep in it by 1 inch. So my front neckline would be a total of 3 inches wide and 2.5 inches deep. Okay. For the button allowance, I went ahead to use a pressing iron to fold it over just so it's easier to sew. So remember we left 2 inches for the button allowance. So I folded it the first time by 1 inch, then folded it again by another 1 inch, which is a total of 2 inch. Then I just used a pressing iron to press it down just so it's easier to sew. Okay, so you might add hemming gum or soft stay to the button stand, whichever one you prefer. Okay, now to close this dart for the front, you'll be attaching loops before closing the dart, or as you close the dart, or as you sew the dart. And to create the loops, I'm using a bias. Now this is a simple bias, a basic bias tape. Now the bias tape comes with 2 raw edges like this, so you want to ensure that you fold it into 2, ensuring that those 2 open edges are stitched inside. So you want to fold it in such a way that those 2 edges that come with the bias tapes are folded inwards like this, and you just create a stop stitch, a simple straight stitch. When you do that, it should look like this. So you can see that the bias is stitched and the edges are all sealed inside. So this is what I'll be using to create the loops for the dress as well as the lace straps. Okay, I'm just going to mix points to indicate where I want each loop to be. So each loop is 2.5 inches apart. So the first one is here, and the distance from that first one to this next one is 2.5, and the distance from the second to the third is 2.5 before I get to where the last spot is. Now I cut out straps that are 2 inches long, so each loop is going to be 2 inches long, or 1 inch long on fold, because I cut out 2 inches, so when I fold it into 2, it's going to be 1 inch. So I'm just going to place that at those points and stitch it down. To stitch down the loops, you want to place your fabric right sides facing. So my fabric is folded like this towards the right. The right sides are facing each other like this. Just see what I'm doing and I'm sure you get a hang of it. Now this is my first loop. You can see it's folded into 2. I'm just going to place it from underneath. You can place it from underneath, or you can place it from the front. Just ensure that it is in between the side front and the center front of the garment. So you want to place it in like this. Now the side that has the fold, or the side of the loop that has the folded part, is what is being hidden inside, while the 2 cut edges is what would be at the dart line. Just see what I'm doing, like I said, and I'm sure you get a hang of it. So you basically take your loop, you place it in. See what I'm doing? It is folded like this. You place it in just right on the spot where you have marked for the loop. You take the third one, you fold it in like this, and then you place it in where you have the third spot for the loop. Just see what I'm doing, like I said, and I hope I'm trying my best to explain this thing very well. Now this is the last one, and it goes it goes into that last spot here like this. So what I'm going to do now is to stitch from here to here. You can pin it down if you desire, but I'm just going to go ahead and stitch. So when you stitch it down, this is what it looks like. So this is the loop for the darts. You can see that I folded that button allowance as well. Now this is what it looks like. So I'm just going to give this a nice press and repeat the same thing on the other front piece as well. Having done that for both front plans, this is what we have. What I'll be doing next is to join the sides of the garment together. Now to join the sides of the garment, remember we took 1 inch from the length of the front. When joining the sides of the garment, I will not be joining from the armhole downwards. Rather, I'll be joining from the hem and work my way through to the armhole. Remember we took 1 inch from the hem of the front. Now this is because we want the back part of the dress to be longer. So what I'm going to do is to pull the front to meet with the back and ensure that it's equal in length. Then I'm just going to sew and work my way through the armhole. Now what this does, it makes the back longer because there's a collar attached to this. You want the back of the dress to be longer just so it doesn't drag or doesn't choke yourself or your client because of the collar. So this is where all that extra 1 inch would come to. For the sleeve, I marked 12 inches from the shoulder and 21 inches from the shoulder respectively. So this is 12 inches from the shoulder and that is 21 inches for the shoulder. The reason I mark these points is because I'll be making casing for the elastic along these lines, and I'll be doing this on both sleeves. Okay, so I'll be making casing for the elastic. Now you can decide to make casing for your elastic or you can decide to stitch your elastic directly on it, but I'm using this fabric to make casing. So what I'm going to do is just to fold it over on one edge and top stitch it to those marked points, and this is what we have when you do that. So basically you just fold the piece of fabric and top stitch it along the marked lines on the wrong side of the fabric. So this is what I have for the casing, and I have this on both sleeves. So I'm going to be passing elastic through this casing, and this is the elastic that I'm using. It is 1 inch thick, or 1 inch wide rather. This elastic is 1 inch wide, and when you pass your elastic, this is what you have. I basically pinned it down, so I'm just going to join the sides of the sleeves and attach it to the garment. So this is pinned down for now. So when I stitch, I'm just going to go ahead and attach it to the garment. After attaching it to the garment, I gave it a good press, gave the entire garment a good press, and this is what it looks like at this point. You can see it's already coming together. You can see the sleeves there. So these are my sleeves. I did not hem the base of the sleeve yet, so I just attached it. So that will be part of the last things I do for this garment. So what I'll be doing next is to make the collar for this garment, and to do this you want to place your neckline like this. Ensure that it is aligned along the front, and you just want to pin it down or secure it down with pins. Then you will take the measurement from your neckline. So I'm going to just ensure that all the seams are aligned, especially on the shoulder. You don't want it to be different. Okay, so I'm just going to measure from that center back all the way to the end of the front neckline. So when measuring, you don't want to place your tape on the edge, raw edge of the neckline. Rather, you want to place it a little bit below the raw edge, like you see me doing. So you just want to take your time to do this. So when I measure mine, it is 8.5 inches. So remember that this neckline is folded into two. So when you multiply that by 2, since it's folded into 2, you should have 17 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and measure the back neckline alone. So from that center back to where I joined the shoulder, I have 4 inches. So you want to take note of all these points because you'll be needing them when you decide to cut out your pattern. Now for the pattern, I'm going to go ahead and mark 8.5 inches and just draw out a straight line. Then from the end, or from the edge of the paper, I'm going to come up by 1 inch, and this is the collar stand that we are making. So we are making the collar stand now. Then I'm going to mark that 4 inches, which is the measurement for just the back neckline, where the back neckline stops. Then I went up by half inch along that fold, and I'm going to connect it to that 4-inch point like this to raise the collar stand. Then I'm going to go up above that line by 1 inch and connect it back to make the initial 1 inch that we made at the end of the pattern. So just see what I'm doing. Next up, I'll be connecting these lines here and making a curve at the tip here, just so it's well rounded. Now this is basically it for the collar stand. Now to make the collar itself, I'm just going to minus 1 inch from the length of the collar stand. So remember our collar stand, the length was 8.5 inches. So what I'm going to measure now is 7.5 inches. And I'm going to draw out a straight line that is 7.5 inches long. Then I'm going to raise that line by 2.5 inches on one side, and on the other side I'm going to raise it by 2 inches. So on this end here I'm going to raise it by 2 inches, while the other end would be 2.5 inches. Now the side that is 2 inches would be the back of the neck of the collar. So for the back, I'll be raising the back of the collar by 2 inches. Then for the front of the collar, where you have that pointiness, you can use anything from 2.5 to 3 inches depending on how high or how pointy or how long you want the front part of your collar to be. But I decided to use 2.5 inches, and that is what I'll be marking out and connecting it back to meet that 2-inch line at the back. Next up, I'm going to connect that line downwards like this with a straight line and extend it forward by half an inch, just to give it that pointiness or that pointy tip of the collar. Then I'm going to cut this out on my collar stay. Now do note that my collar stay is folded into two, because remember that when we were measuring the neckline, we folded our neckline into two. So when you're cutting out your collar stay, you want to fold your collar stay into two. And I'm cutting the collar stay the exact way I cut out the pattern paper. And when you do that, it should look like this. You can see I indicated the 4-inch point. So that is basically the 4-inch point for the back. Then I'm going to cut out my collar stay on my main fabric, but before I cut it out, I'm going to measure half an inch allowance all the way around the collar stay. Now this allowance is going to be on the fabric only, okay? So I'm just going to add allowance all the way around before going ahead to iron the collar stay onto the main fabric. Now do know that I have two pieces of this, so I'll be cutting out two pieces of this collar stand as well as two pieces of the main collar. After cutting out the main fabric, this is what I have. Then I'm just going to go ahead and iron the collar stay onto the main fabric and take out the pins. All right, then for the collar, I'm going to iron, then sew from here all the way through the top and down the other side. Now when sewing, you want to ensure that you sew really close to the edge of the collar stay. So I'm just going to go do that. So when you do it, it should look something like this. I turned it right sides out and gave it a good press. Then I'll go ahead and top stitch all the way around from the sides all through the top down the other side, and just top stitch it just so everything is held down in place. Now for the collar stand, you can see that the part that has the collar stay, I folded the lower edge with my pressing iron along this side just so it's easier to stitch. Now the side that is folded is the lower part, which will be attaching to the neckline of the garment. So I folded the lower edge with the pressing iron, then I went ahead to stop stitch it, and this is what we have. So I'll be attaching these two pieces together first. I notched the middle of my main collar as well as the middle of the collar stand that has the stay. So I'm just going to place that over it like this, right sides facing, ensuring that those notch points align. Then I'm going to stitch from end to end on these pieces. Now when stitching, I stitch really close to the collars, from really close to the edge of the collar stay here and not the edge of the fabric, okay? So you want to take note of this when you're sewing. You want to sew really close to the edge of the collar stay and not the edge of the main fabric. So I haven't stitched that down. I'm just going to go attach the other piece of collar stand onto the other side of the fabric. So you can see that we have this attached here. I'm just going to go ahead and attach the other piece of collar stand to the other side of the fabric. So I'm just going to stitch this down, place it right side, ensuring that the notch points align first before going to stitch from end to end, using that first seam as a guide when sewing this. When you do that and turn it right sides out, ensure to give it a nice press like this and attach it to the neckline of your collar, or the neckline of your shirt rather. So I'm just going to do that, and this is what we have. You can see how neat the collar is inside. Even inside, the collar is really neat, and on the right side as well. So this is what we have for the collar. I basically pinned the button allowance together. What I'll be doing next is to fold the hem of the sleeves. I'll be folding the hem of both sleeves as well as the hem of the garment, which I have not done. I'll also go ahead and add button allowance and sew buttons onto this garment, and that will be pretty much it. I will show you guys the finished look once I'm done. After doing all the finishing touches, this is the final look for the dress. I love how simple and beautiful it is. I really love this dress, trust me. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section. Do give this video a thumbs up if you liked it or enjoyed the video, or even if you learned something, just drop a comment in the comment section, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. I'll be seeing you guys in another video. Bye bye.